Glen Coleman, welcome to Competencies Without a Classroom. I'm super excited to have you here. I've been a fan of your podcast for a little while, as I'm sure we'll get to talk about shortly. But before we get into that and the amazing work that you're doing right now, Glen, I'm going to start this conversation the same way we start every one of these podcast interviews. And it's by asking you probably the most important question that you're going to get today. It's a question that is going to help set a tone for the rest of this interview. And it's, quite frankly, the question that our listeners want an answer to. So, Glen Coleman, when it comes to pineapple on pizza, are you a yes or a no?
I'm a hell yes.
Good answer. Okay.
Yes, sir.
You are in the slight majority, and that is what I wanted to hear. So now, Glen, that our listeners are on board with you and we're a fan of you, give us a quick intro. Who is Glen Coleman? What are you doing for work right now?
Okay. I teach social studies in the high school. Been teaching basically world civilizations for over 20 years, which gave me an opportunity to really explore the content and think outside the box with regard to pedagogy. And I live in North Jersey, and it's a blast.
This was something that I heard a lot from like the Trevor Noahs and the Stephen Colberts and like the talk show hosts of the world, that people would say when Trump was out of the office, are they still going to have things to talk about? Is that similar in social studies? Like, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, has this past 4, 5, 6 years been a more interesting or newsworthy time as a social studies teacher compared to the earlier part of your career, or is there just always stuff to talk about in this profession?
Yeah, it's inspired me to write a book, actually. COVID-19, I thought I'm going to make something from this craziness, which is going to be a book, which is basically asking, how do we teach in a time of pandemics and polarization, which requires, I think, a lot of outside the box thinking, because a new normal is definitely not normal to most of us. Yeah, we have plenty to talk about. And I would just say in my curriculum, if the history is not connecting to the present and informing our conversation, we really shouldn't teach it.
I love that. And I love, you just said outside the box, which is a great segue to kind of introduce the first question. So Glen, like we talked about, season 1 of this podcast was talking to folks in industry, your CEOs, hiring managers that are building out their 21st century teams to distill what these competencies, these skills are they're looking for when they're building out their teams and what they actually look like in action. Pretty good sense of that at this point. And what I'm trying to do with season 2 with this conversation is to amplify the voice of the educators, the Glen Colemans of the world, to share stories and allow other teachers to borrow and steal ideas to bring back to their classroom. So with that, Glen, what's something you've done in your classroom over the years to intentionally empower your students to develop one of these 21st century skills?
Well, I think that the first thing, Damien, is we need to not only celebrate failure, but we need to make it our calling card. We need to fail gloriously and often in front of our friends, fall flat on our face and learn from it. I feel very passionately about it because learning is basically a means to overcome an obstacle with feedback and the support of peers and educators. So if you don't have failure, you don't have any material with which to learn. So in my school or my class, failure is the goal, as it allows us to have material from which to learn. So it also is funny, because it doesn't become about me or the student, it becomes about this mountain that we climb. And I think people rally around obstacles that are formidable. So it also allows us to have these high expectations, but with grit, with community, we can do a lot of good stuff.
I love that so much, Glen. I mean, I could talk about failure for hours, but let's get granular a little bit. So I'm another teacher. I'm listening to this. What does that actually mean? Because you're a high school teacher, right? Your students are getting grades. They're worried about how those grades are going to affect their post-secondary possibilities. So, like, how do you pitch to the student that it's okay to fail in your class?
I'll give you 2 examples. The first example is, let's say we have 2-minute speech, no notes. That's hard. That's legitimately hard.
Yeah.
So you're going to speak 2 minutes, no notes about, let's say, the most recent prompt is what enlightenment ideal needs an update so as to avoid another January 6th siege of the Capitol.
Sure.
So the Enlightenment ideals are ideals of democracy, elections, checks and balances, free speech. There's a whole bunch of these ideals that were coined in the 1700s.
Right.
Which of those ideals should be tweaked? Should it be Enlightenment 2.0, 3.0, so that our country can move ahead and not have what happened on January 6th? So you make a speech in front of your friends, no notes, and it's awful. And then we give feedback so that we could learn what works and what doesn't work. And then from the failure, really stitching together, I call it kind of like just glints of excellence.
Yep.
So that as more students present, they grow in their competence and confidence. But as importantly, it then kind of raises the expectations, because you can't repeat what anybody else said. It has to be somewhat unique.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one example. The other example is that I'll give a test first. I don't give tests last. So that speech, that would be the test, the project. 2 minutes, no notes.
Okay.
So then what I'll do is I'll give a test first. And I so want to drop foul language, but I respect you too much, Damien. And I'm just going to say, it is hard.
Yeah.
100 questions is easy. Like, I've had like 170 questions or more. That gets to be a bit of a story, but I'll describe the 100-question test. Students take 2 days reading, listening to my online lectures that I created, and they're learning. Next day, everybody has to get 100 on that test. It's really hard.
Yeah.
And so the only way to get 100 on this is to redo it and redo it and redo it and redo it. And it's a grind. And what is it doing? It's creating community. It's creating camaraderie. It's creating accountability because of failure.
Glenn, I want to be in your class, man. This I love
it's
that
fun. It's fun.
That does sound fun. So I went through, I don't even know what to call it. It was like a personal development boot camp type of thing on a day one. I think, let's say there was 10 of us. They made everybody walk up in front of the group and they filmed you, and you had to do kind of the improv with the person that was filming you. And then as a community, as a group, we had to all watch back that clip on day one. And then over the course of, the next 5 or so days, we did things that would help us just become more comfortable and more authentic. And then, film it again on the last day, and it's night and day. So there's something there, like you said, about failure, being able to get up, do the thing right away, no notes, but then be able to fail in front of the community, be able to know that you're in a supportive group, they're failing too, and then reflect on all of that. You also talked about something I'm thinking a lot of lately is rethinking and unlearning. So thinking about those ideals and how change. So
it's exciting because it so changes the script, because it's not about Glen Coleman, the authority figure. Like, I have the answers. I don't know what ideal needs an update. I have no idea. Like, I don't know. And I think that I don't know is really powerful. But I would say what's more powerful than I don't know, and this is bold, is to ask, what do you think?
Yeah.
And really care about it. And then we have a conversation, and that makes life interesting.
That's amazing. I mean, it's easier said than done, but I think the best kind of teaching is coaching, and the best kind of coaching comes by asking these kind of questions, right? To allow people to get there on their own. So
amen, brother.
Super cool. Okay, Glenn, based on this amazing work you're doing in the classroom, you've now been promoted to superintendent. Congratulations. So for the next 10 minutes anyways, but you've been tasked with deciding one of these core competencies. So one of these 21st century skills that every one of your graduating students needs to display evidence of in order to graduate. If you could only pick one, which one are you picking?
Just for the sake of clarity, I would say it's a 2-minute speech, no notes. Okay, I think something like that, maybe if it's a senior, you could make it a little bit longer, but the point isn't memorizing. The point is using course content to enrich your understanding of the world and to communicate more clearly about it. So if a student all of a sudden speaks for 3 minutes compared to 2, that to me doesn't mean much. What means something to me is that the student learned something meaningful so that they could apply it to today. So I just think that kind of a speech could go a long way. Something like that. And of course, you got to speak your truth.
Yeah. No, I think that would be a great exercise for everybody. I mean, not only the obvious skills, like a communication is going to be improved from doing that, but being resilient, because when you do it the first time, it's not going to be great.
Of course.
the resilience to get back and do it again, and, critical thinking on the spot or problem solving on the spot. Like, what are you coming up with? So yeah, I love that activity.
Could I just say one thing that just comes to mind real quick, just as you're talking? The thing that's interesting to me is that our bias may be of students is this default within like the engine of their brain and their heart is like, I don't want to do it. At the same time, more profound than that is not being told or being told that you can't do it. So I think that the challenge itself silences a lot of that inner criticism. It's like, something, I am somebody, I can do that. My friend did it. I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
100%.
Challenging is good.
100%. It's representation, right? And, we talk a lot about visual representation, different minorities and ethnicities, but it's also people at the same age and stage as you, right? So if you can see somebody else in your shoes doing it, that's huge, right?
And I'll say one more thing. I know it's a 15-minute podcast here, but to hear people's voices that you've never heard before is very exciting for everyone.
Oh my God. I bet you as a teacher, the quiet, shy, introverted student, who doesn't raise their hand, to see them do that. Yeah.
Incredible.
So Glenn, let's do some rapid fires for you. What's a life skill that you weren't taught in high school, but maybe that you wish that you were?
How to lose gracefully. I try to squelch my competitive fire, but I'm not a really graceful loser. I don't like to lose. But I think as I'm, trying to teach my students how to overcome failure, in the same way, for me to learn, how do you overcome striking out? How do you overcome, not catching the ball? And I think that would have been a great skill to learn. And I guess I am learning that through my students because, their lesson is lifelong.
Right. That's an amazing one. I mean, it was one of, sports aren't for everyone growing up. I think there's a lot of great skills and competencies you learn from being on a team, right? But I think to that, one of the best things that I was able to take away from that growing up is that, no matter how hard, because it's great to be competitive, right? But no matter how hard you play at the end of the game, you're shaking that person's hand on the other team, right? There's that level of respect.
Absolutely huge. Yes.
So Glenn, you have a billboard, say it's in Times Square, everyone's going to see it, and you can write one thing on it. What does it say?
That's a hard question, but I think I would just say fail gloriously.
Yeah.
I think something like that, because I think that your own sense of pride and your sense of connection to the world will say, something, I'm going to get back up. I think that's what I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Glenn, you teach social studies in high school, but
I do.
When you were a student in high school, did you have a favorite class?
It was probably social studies.
Yeah.
I just kind of got it. Like I understood it. Yeah.
No, I'm happy that you're able to follow it into a profession that you still love today, right?
It's a great gift. Yeah.
Yeah. You talked about how you're writing a book, which we'll come back to in a sec, but what about reading? So what's a book that you've read that's had such an impact on you that maybe you wish you would have read it from a younger age?
I think it would be Sapiens. Sapiens is such a beautiful book because it tells me about the power of story. It tells me about the power of us. I used to think that like my story was really important. That's incorrect. It's for us to be in an environment where we gather around the campfire and tell each other stories. Because if it's just me, I mean, honestly, I'm going to snore through that class. But if it's going to be us, now I'm in. Now I'm interested. And I think that's what Sapiens taught me.
It's a fantastic book. Have you read the follow-up to it?
I did. I found it too depressing.
Yeah.
Helma Deus was too depressing, but I listened to Yuval Harari quite a lot, and Timothy Snyder's a historian I'm really fascinated by lately.
Okay. Yeah, I haven't read Helma Deus, but I've heard similar about it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Glenn, so you have a magic wand. You can change one thing about the education system as we know it today. What would you change?
Can I do like one and a half?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it quick. The first one is, I would say make every course interdisciplinary, simply because it forces teachers to get outside of their silo and to create something new. And where there's collaboration and conversation, there's great opportunity. Whereas when people are just siloed, you really have these very fixed variables that will not change because there's no conversation, there's no fresh water. The second thing is, I've been doing this for 23 years and this doesn't apply to me so much, But I think if you pay teachers more money, then you're going to get higher quality teachers, because people that are, let's say, really, really good students, which doesn't necessarily mean they'll be great teachers, but you have a more powerful pool from which to draw.
Yeah.
So those two things come to mind.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, yeah, there's definitely something to that, right? Where if raise the bar and you make it worth their while, you're going to attract a certain type of individual, right? That you may not have, who has opportunities elsewhere, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Okay, Glenn, so wrap us up. You talked about the book. You also have a podcast. Where can people go to learn a bit more about all the amazing stuff that's happening inside your head and inside your classroom? So
they can reach me at Twitter at Glen L. Coleman. I don't know, I'm just new to this because I've created my book, right? It's just about to go out into the world. I mean, saying an email address online is probably not the best idea. I mean, what do you think?
If you want people emailing you.
Well, I would say that they could Facebook message me if they go to Coleman Nation.
Okay.
Facebook, Coleman Nation.
Yeah.
And they could go, of course, to my podcast, teacherbreathe.com, where I talk to, it's just an opportunity to talk to people that are interesting to me. Yeah. Like I would interview you, I love learning. So I'll just call somebody up and sometimes people that are pretty well known and they want to have a conversation that I'll happily have.
The best excuse to talk to interesting people, right?
It is. It's wonderful.
By the time this goes out, Glenn, your book is going to go out. So what's the name of your book?
The name of the book, the title was just changed last night, which is 100 or Nothing. That's a test that we spoke about. 100 or Nothing, Reimagining Success in the Classroom.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, Glenn, I can't thank you enough for taking the time and sharing your stories. I was amazed by them, so I know the teachers will be as well. Have a fantastic rest of your day and a weekend, Glenn.
Thank you, Brother Damien. It's really a pleasure. It's fun.